Now, according to the New Yorker magazine, Jill Abramson was shown the door because she demanded to be paid the same as her predecessor. Apparently, a few weeks ago, she snooped around, discovered that her pay and pension benefits as executive and managing editor were considerably less than the privilege checker, Bill Keller, the man, white man editor who she replaced. Now, the story goes that Abramson decided to confront the Times top brass about this, and then it helped create the narrative among management that she was, what's the word, pushy. And that was the excuse to fire her. The New York Times, of course, is denying that she was fired because of pay demands. Joining me to discuss this is Genevieve Wood of the Heritage Foundation. Well, I'm going to assume, Genevieve, that Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook canceled her subscription to the New York Times because they banned Bossy. Or didn't ban
Well, that's a good question.
They banned the Bossy woman.
They banned the bossy and the pushy. It's interesting. I mean, there's all these stories. Who really, truly knows the truth, right? I mean, if you read the New York Times, you get one story. If you read the New Yorker and other places, you get others. But this is one of those things that I have a feeling if she was really worth her, if they really thought she was doing a good job, she was going to take the New York Times to the next level and keep putting them out there and getting them in front, that they would have been willing to pay her whatever that took. So, maybe going in and asking for a raise didn't help, but I'm not really sure that's why she's no longer the executive editor.
Well, I did read the New York Times story, which was odd because they said she had a tense relationship with management and newsroom staff.
Yeah.
Again, sounds like Bossy to me. Here's the thing. The New York Times is a dying entity, so I don't know anything about Jill Abramson, but it sounds like nobody can save it.
Well, that's possibly true. I know there are a lot of folks who say they've got to push more and more into the digital arena, digital age. And there was a question of whether or not she was really the person to do that. The person that they've now appointed, they think maybe he's got more experience in that area. But look, I mean, it's one of those things where it is hypocritical in the sense that this is a newspaper that every time the whole debate over equal pay has come up, they've been at the forefront demanding this. Yet here they are in the very position of having to now explain why they aren't guilty of the very high levels that they expect everybody else to live under. And I don't think they're doing a very good job of it. I mean, the fact is, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, doesn't matter if you're a man. It depends on how well you're doing the job and if you're worth whatever you're asking of your employer. And it seems to me that Jill Abramson, I don't know what she asked for, but apparently the publisher didn't think she was worth it.
Let me tell you something. If we fired the managing and executive editor of theblaze.com, if we fired a woman for being pushy, it would be non-stop assaults on MSNBC and the New York Times and Twitter that apparently conservatives can't handle educated women who demand to get the job done. That sort of thing. That we're obviously intimidated by that.
Well, no, I think you're right. There's without a doubt a double standard, without a doubt. But the fact is, it's not good for men or women, and especially for women, if basically everybody thinks you're a walking legal case or a walking political case or headline that's going to break. That's not good for women, period, because then why does any employer want to ever take that on? So I think we need to get out of that business. Unfortunately, the New York Times and others will, I'm sure, continue to perpetuate that position on their editorial pages. But again, when it came to living it up, they couldn't actually reach the same standards that they demand everybody else does. But, the White House is guilty of the same thing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, though. How can you call it equal pay? I mean, if two people with the same resume and experience are doing the same job in the same place for the same amount of time and turning out an equivalent effort, they should get paid an equal pay. But if you're taking over for someone, how can you say that your predecessor should be the watermark for how you get paid? And I'll use myself. I'm on Glenn Beck's network, right? I can't say to Glenn, well, you host a 1-hour show on The Blaze, and I host a 1-hour show on The Blaze. You have to pay me what you make. He would probably rightly say, I've been doing this for a lot longer than you, and I own the network. And I would, I'm just speaking in, but I've only been doing this for about 19 months. I'm relatively new at this. I can't demand the salaries that people who've been doing this for a decade get.
Well, I think you're right. But look, as your ratings go up, as they are, and people are more and more of folks out there become your fans, you're going to have every right to go in and say, hey, maybe I'd like to have a little bit more money because I'm bringing more and more to this network. And then you've got a case to make. But look, everybody has to be able to be confident, walk into their boss's office and say, here's what I think I'm worth, if you don't think you're getting paid what you're worth. But everybody is not equal, as you said, in the amount of experience they bring to the table, maybe in the case of whether it's journalism or television, the amount of fans that you bring to a network. All of that goes into what you are worth to the entity that you're working for. And, you know, when Jill Abramson took the job, I'm assuming she knew what her salary was, and she must have thought that was a good, fair payment because she accepted the job. You know, I think when people start going and trying to figure out what everybody else is making and then base their own self-worth on that, that's a problem. I mean, she should have known from the get-go if she was getting fairly paid. She, you know, is this a job? Here's how many hours I'm putting into it. Am I getting enough money out of it? I think for a long time she thought she was, but apparently recently maybe she thought differently.
You think progressive women are going to run out to cancel their New York Times subscription, or is it like everything else that the individual just gets cast aside? I mean, we can't question the New York Times or Bill Clinton or any of it. I mean, whenever a woman or somebody who is seen as a champion of a cause by the rest of the group ends up in a conflict with a greater progressive entity, it seems like that individual gets cast aside, like Monica Lewinsky.
Well, you're right. Here's what I would hope we would see, and I think I forgot the arts editor in the Times who wrote a blog piece on this today. She at least raised the question, and I think that's what we ought to do. I don't want to see them out there championing the fact that Jill Abramson ought to be able to make the exact same as Keller, who was her predecessor, made. But I think it's fair that they ought to raise the question of, look, here we work for an entity that has always demanded this equal pay type of legislation and that kind of political position and viewpoint. It's fair to ask them what happened here and why didn't that work out here. But I don't think we want to get in the business of demanding they come to the wrong conclusion, which is she should have been making the same as every other man.
I'm talking about the sole last standing delivery route of the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm not talking about me and you. I'm looking for consistency here in New York City with progressives. I don't think we're ever going to see it.
No, we're not going to get it. But how can you get it? Because they're wrong. I mean, you cannot run a business the way that they say that they would want to. I'm sure the New York Times would like to run a business based on some of the things that they try to demand, equal pay and other labor type issues. Look, every personnel decision has a lot of factors that go into it. When you hire somebody or when you let somebody go, there's a lot of factors usually that go into that. And sometimes maybe it's pay, but usually it's a lot of things. And so I think that's why we need the government to stay out of the labor business and to stay out of personnel decisions, because there's no way they can ever come up with a law that's going to quote unquote make everything fair and equal.
All right, Genevieve, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Let's move on to tonight's memorandum.